Colonel Kiyonao Ichiki of the Imperial Japanese Army marched his men straight into a killing box. He had 917 soldiers, orders to retake an airfield, and a decision not to wait for the rest of his regiment to arrive. He believed the Marines guarding it were thin and unprepared for a night assault. He was wrong. By the next afternoon, roughly 800 of his men were dead, and the popular story about why leaves out the part that actually killed them. The real answer was found on Ichiki's body, 3 lines in his own handwriting, and we will read them just as the Marines found them. 2 weeks earlier, US Marines had stormed ashore at Lunga Point and grabbed an airfield the Japanese were still building, half-finished runways and construction equipment left behind in the rush to get out. They renamed it Henderson Field, after Major Lofton Henderson, a Marine aviator killed at the Battle of Midway 2 months earlier, and they raced to finish it while Japanese bombers hit them from the air almost every day. That airfield is the whole reason any of this matters. Once it's running, American planes, what the Marines on the island call the Cactus Air Force, can reach out and choke the destroyer runs the Japanese use to move troops and gear down through the Solomon Islands. The runs the Americans will come to call the Tokyo Express. The Japanese themselves called them rat transportation because they only moved at night. Lose that airfield and Japan's entire position in the South Pacific gets a lot harder to hold. This is also the first major American ground offensive of the war, which means Washington is watching this stretch of jungle almost as closely as Tokyo is. For Imperial General Headquarters, this isn't just a tactical problem. Japan hadn't lost a major ground battle anywhere in this war. Letting a small American landing force keep an airfield the Japanese had already built themselves would be an embarrassment stacked on top of a setback. So Tokyo orders an immediate counterattack. The trouble is, nobody back in Tokyo actually knows how many Marines are down there. Getting a large ground force onto Guadalcanal means running destroyers past American aircraft in small batches with limited supplies, and the reports that do make it back are built on fragments and guesswork. Early estimates badly undercount the number of Marines ashore, and that mistake is about to shape everything that happens next. The man chosen to lead the counterattack is Colonel Kiyonao Ichiki, a veteran officer commanding the 28th Infantry Regiment. 5 years earlier, Ichiki was the battalion commander at the Marco Polo Bridge on the night the shooting started, the incident that touched off Japan's war with China. The war he helped begin has now carried him to a beach in the Solomon Islands. His regiment has a reputation for aggression built over years of campaigning, and Ichiki himself is trusted enough to get the first crack at retaking the airfield. But there's a catch. Only part of his regiment has actually reached Guadalcanal. Roughly 917 men, what the record calls his first echelon, have landed east of the marine perimeter, while the rest of the 28th Infantry Regiment is still on transports, days away, and depending on how the naval battles around the island go. Those naval battles had already gone badly for the Americans. The Battle of Savo Island, fought just days before the landing, had cost the US Navy 4 cruisers in a single night and left the Marines without reliable resupply. On the American side, Major General Alexander Vandergrift already expects a Japanese counterattack aimed at retaking the airfield, and he's begun positioning his limited Marine units to cover the most likely routes in. And working alongside the Marines is a network of coast watchers, Allied intelligence operatives hidden across the Solomon Islands, coordinated in part by British officer Martin Clemens, whose scouts had been feeding Vandergrift information about Japanese movements since before the landing began. So while Ichiki stands on a beach with under 1,000 men, orders to retake an airfield, and a command back in Tokyo that badly underestimates how many Marines he's actually facing, on the other side of the jungle the Marines are already getting ready for him. That's the situation Ichiki has to make a call on, and it's the call that decides whether 917 men live or die. Japanese Army doctrine at this point in the war leans hard on offensive spirit. Night attacks are supposed to be a Japanese strength. Infantry trained to close the distance in the dark and settle things with the bayonet, even against an enemy with more firepower. The idea of an honorable death in a doomed attack, a concept Japan would later formalize under the word gyokusai, carries more weight in this culture than the idea of pulling back to fight another day. Officers are expected to lead from the front and interpret their orders aggressively instead of waiting for detailed instructions, and Ichiki's regiment was built inside that culture. It shapes the choice he makes next. He decides to move now with the men he already has, rather than sit on the beach until the rest of the 28th Infantry finishes landing. If the Marines are as thin and disorganized as Tokyo's estimate says, speed matters more than numbers, and every day he waits is a day the Marines get to dig in deeper. On August 19th, a Marine patrol led by Captain Charles Brush runs into a Japanese reconnaissance patrol east of the perimeter, 38 men scouting the ground ahead of Ichiki's main force. Brush splits his 60 men, sending most of them straight at the Japanese, while one platoon swings around to cut off their escape. In under an hour, all but 5 of the 38 are dead, and the 5 survivors escape east too late to warn anyone. The Marines lose 3 men killed and 3 wounded, and when they search the bodies, they find maps, detailed maps of the American positions, accurate enough to unsettle the officers who examined them. The Japanese already had a read on where the Marines were dug in. What the Marines now have is proof that a much larger Japanese force is close behind, and they use it. What Cates does with those maps in the next 36 hours is what actually kills the Ichiki detachment. Ichiki doesn't know his scouts are gone, but he's about to lose something even more important. Moving through the jungle ahead of his column, his soldiers encounter a local man named Jacob Vuza, a retired sergeant major of the Solomon Islands police force, who had been working as a scout for Martin Clemens and the Marines. Ichiki's men capture him, find an American flag on his person, and interrogate him about the Marine positions. Vuza refuses to talk. They tie him to a tree and work on him with bayonets, stabbing him multiple times through the throat and chest and leaving him for dead. He isn't dead. Vuza chews through the ropes binding his wrists, crawls through the jungle, and reaches the Marine perimeter barely able to speak, his throat punctured. He manages to get out a warning. A Japanese force is close and moving fast, before collapsing. Doctors work on him for hours. He survives. The Marines now have minutes of additional warning before the attack begins, and Vuza's information confirms exactly what Cates and Pollock have already prepared for. Radio contact with his own higher command is thin and unreliable in the jungle, so Ichiki is operating mostly on his original orders and his own judgment. His 917 men keep moving through the coastal jungle and coconut plantations toward a shallow tidal river the Marines call Alligator Creek, with forward scouts ahead, but nothing like a real reconnaissance of what's actually waiting on the other side. He's closing the distance on a position he hasn't seen, trusting an estimate of the enemy that was already wrong before he landed. Japanese intelligence on American strength has been off before in this campaign, but that pattern hasn't slowed anyone down yet, and it doesn't slow Ichiki down now. The story people repeat is that the Marines just let the Japanese get close, like a trick pulled off in the moment. It wasn't. In the day and a half after Brush's patrol comes back with those maps, the 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, under Lieutenant Colonel Edwin Pollock, turns the west bank of Alligator Creek into a prepared position. On the coastal approach Vandegrift expected a Japanese attack to use. Pollock answers to Colonel Clifton Cates, who commands the 1st Marine Regiment, and between them, they build a defense meant to kill anyone who tries to cross that river the way Ichiki is about to. The one place Ichiki's maps say he can cross is a narrow sandbar at the river's mouth, low and exposed, with almost nothing on it to take cover behind. It's the one obvious place to get across without wading through a swamp, and the Marines know it. Barbed wire runs along the bank in front of it. Machine guns are sighted with overlapping fields of fire, so anyone caught in front of one gun is caught in front of 2 or 3 at once. Marines wait in shallow foxholes cut into the sand and jungle scrub along the bank, close enough to see the crossing but low enough to stay clear of their own crossfire. Artillery is already registered on the crossing, which means the gunners have worked out exactly where their shells will land before a single Japanese soldier steps onto that sand. Ichiki's column is a day's march away and knows none of it. After the brush patrol fight on the 19th, Cates pushes the defense even further. He sends up about 100 men from the 1st Special Weapons Battalion, along with 2 37mm anti-tank guns loaded with canister shot and aimed straight down the length of the sandbar, close enough to the water to hit anything that tries to cross before it gets halfway. Marines are trained to hold their fire until an attacking force is fully committed inside a killing zone they've already mapped out, not to open up the second they spot movement in the dark. So this is what Ichiki doesn't know is waiting for him at the river. Not an open field where the Marines happen to let him get close, but a prepared kill zone with wire to slow him down. A narrow strip of sand with guns already aimed at it from 3 directions. And young Marines, most of them new to combat, holding their fire and their nerve until it's too late for whoever's crossing to turn back. 1:30 in the morning, a green flare goes up over the water and Ichiki's attack begins. About 100 men from his 2nd company charge across the sandbar, straight at the Marine line. Boots pounding on wet sand in the dark. The wire slows them down the way it's supposed to, and the machine guns open up right where the gunners planned. Tracers cutting flat across the crossing. Men who make it through the wire and briefly break into the Marine line get cut down by a reserve company, held back for this moment. Less than an hour after that flare goes up, the first assault is finished, and most of the 100 men who cross the sandbar are dead on it, some of them still tangled in the wire that was only supposed to slow them for a few seconds. Ichiki has just lost 100 men in under an hour. He has one message he could send, one order that saves the rest. He doesn't send it. Marine accounts from that night describe some of the Japanese soldiers shouting, even singing as they charged, the same aggressive momentum their training was built around. A few try to cut through the wire by hand instead of finding a way around it, working at it with blades while machine gun fire rakes the sand on both sides of them. A handful make it far enough to reach the first line of Marine foxholes, and for a few minutes it's close range, hand to hand in the dark, before the line holds and the reserve company finishes it. Ichiki doesn't call it off. At 2:30, he sends his 1st and 3rd companies across the same strip of sand, another 150 to 200 men running into the same wire and the same guns. It plays out just like the first assault. The sandbar is already littered with bodies from an hour earlier, and now it fills up again. Muzzle flashes the only way anyone on either side can tell what's happening in the dark. Twice now, Ichiki has thrown men at a position that has already proven, twice, that it can't be taken this way. He has no tanks and no heavy artillery of his own, nothing that can answer the wire and the guns waiting on the other side of that river. What he has left is a doctrine that says press forward no matter the cost, and a belief that willpower can still close a gap that firepower alone can't. Neither one is going to get his men across that sandbar. Around 5 in the morning, a further wave of Japanese troops tries something different. Instead of crossing the sandbar again, they wade out into the ocean surf, trying to work around the Marine flank where the wire doesn't reach. Marine fire catches them there too, out in the open water with nowhere to take cover, and that attempt fails the same way the first 2 did. And the worst thing that can happen to the survivors hasn't arrived yet. It's sitting behind the Marine lines, waiting for the sun. By the time this 3rd attempt collapses, close to 3.5 hours of fighting have passed since that first green flare. 3 separate assaults thrown at the same crossing, each one broken the same way the last one was. As the sky gets lighter, the fight tips even further toward the Marines. Daylight means better observation across the whole crossing, and it means tanks and artillery can move up to clear out whatever Japanese soldiers are still holding on east of the river, dug into whatever cover they found overnight. Marines cross the creek behind the armor and start working through that ground position by position, hunting survivors who have nowhere left to retreat to and no way to call in help of their own. Ichiki's men, committed to a doctrine built on speed and nerve, don't have another plan once the frontal assault fails. The same mindset that got him to this river faster than the Marines expected is now the reason he keeps feeding men into a crossing that has already killed hundreds of them in the dark. There's no reserve of heavy weapons to fall back on, and no alternate route around the defense, just more men sent at the same wire and the same guns, because the doctrine he trained under never planned for what happens when the charge runs into a position that was already finished before he got there. For most of the war so far, that doctrine had worked. Nothing in it accounted for an enemy that could outshoot and outlast a determined infantry charge, wave after wave, without breaking. By the time the sun is fully up, there's very little left of the force that marched toward Henderson Field, believing this would be an easy fight. By late afternoon on the 21st, it's over. What historians call the Battle of the Tenaru, sometimes the Battle of Alligator Creek, ends with organized Japanese resistance in the sector collapsing. Of the 917 men Ichiki brought with him, somewhere between about 775 and 800 are dead. Historians' counts differ by a few dozen, none by much. Just over 40 Marines are dead and about 70 more wounded, a kill ratio of nearly 20-1, making it one of the most lopsided American ground victories of the entire Pacific War. When the Marines searched the field, they recovered Ichiki's journal. The entry, written before he landed, read, 18 August, the landing. 20 August, the march by night and battle. 21 August, enjoyment of the fruits of victory. 21 August is the day nearly all of his men died on the sandbar. He had written the outcome down before he ever saw the river. Ichiki himself dies in the final hours, though accounts differ on how. The Japanese official history says he burned the regimental colors and took his own life. A survivor said he was last seen walking toward the American guns. The record doesn't settle it. Jacob Vuza, the man Ichiki's soldiers had bayoneted and left for dead in the jungle hours before the attack, recovered from his wounds. He was later awarded the Silver Star by the United States and the George Medal by Britain. He lived until 1984. Lieutenant Colonel Pollock spends most of the night and morning forward of his command post, directing the defense under mortar and machine gun fire, and he's later awarded the Navy Cross for it. That's the part of the story that gets left out when people say the Marines simply let the enemy get close. They didn't win by waiting and hoping. They won because Pollock, Cates, and every Marine behind that wire had already done the work of turning one narrow sandbar into a place built to kill whoever tried to cross it before Ichiki ever reached the river. And because Ichiki kept sending men across it even after it had already proven, twice, exactly what would happen to the third wave. For Japanese soldiers and officers elsewhere on Guadalcanal who hear what happened at the river, the destruction of Ichiki's echelon is a shock to a version of the war they believed in since Pearl Harbor. The idea that a determined assault could beat almost anything the Americans put in front of it. For the Marines, it's the opposite. Proof that their fire discipline and their willingness to dig in and wait actually work against the kind of attack they'd been warned to expect. Henderson Field stays in American hands. The Cactus Air Force keeps flying. The airfield Ichiki was ordered to take back is still there behind the Marine perimeter when the sun comes up. And with it running, Japan can no longer move troops and supplies down the slot in daylight. Everything now has to come by night, in pieces, on destroyers. 917 men marched toward that airfield on a schedule that ended with enjoyment of the fruits of victory. The date he wrote it for is the date almost all of them died, beaten not by luck or a trick, but by an enemy who had done the work he skipped. For more deep dives into military history, make sure you're subscribed to the channel.